Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the RITIS user group meeting. We're happy to have you join us. We're going to just briefly go through a few housekeeping items for you. We are using Zoom webinar as usual for our RITIS user group meetings. So you should be connected either through your computer or phone. This web meeting is being recorded. If you have any questions or any issues with the audio or the web, please reach out to Esther Cleet. And we will get to the important things like asking questions. We're welcome all of your questions today, and you can either ask those using the Q&A. And so then you would just simply type your question into the Q&A and it'll be answered either at the end of the presentation or at the end of the meeting, depending on what it is. If you prefer to ask your question verbally, you can do that. We're going to ask you to raise your hand. That brings you to the top of the list and lets us know that you have a question. We will unmute your line for you so that you can ask your question. The only thing we ask is once you're finished, if you can just please remember to mute your line. At this point, I'm very happy to turn it over to Nicole Forrest. She is the TISMO Program Associate for the Eastern Transportation Coalition. Nicole?
Thank you, Joanna. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the RITIS meeting. Just a couple of announcements that we have coming up. Our RITIS user group web meeting, we have two scheduled, February 6th, excuse me, of 2025 and May 1st of 2025 as well. We have a RITIS workshop that's going to be focusing on using probe data analytics for congestion management process reports. That is also scheduled for February 25th of 2025. So with that, I would like to then turn it over to Jesse Burke, who is with the Office of Capital Programs with the Delaware Valley Planning Agency, and he's our RITIS user group co-chair. Just a little bit about Mr. Burke. He assists with project development and coordination, as well as maintain and updates the Pennsylvania, New Jersey transportation improvement programs. He also serves as a co-chair for us, as I stated, and works closely with PennDOT to provide planning assistance for the multi-billion-dollar reconstruction of I-95 in Philadelphia. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Jesse.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Great, as always, to see so much participation from all up and down the East Coast into the Midwest, through the South and to the West Coast as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really diverse set of agencies as well. So really great to see. As usual, we have a great agenda for you, a really interesting spotlight presentation from Patrick Jacks with Arcadis. He's going to talk about the I-24 Smart Corridor and how they've been using RITIS to build performance management dashboards, and getting into some techniques for how to really automate and streamline those processes. So looking forward to that presentation. Michael Pack will provide the usual status and enhancement updates for the RITIS tools. Always great to see how things are evolving and improving with input from all of you. Bob Frey will cover some of the RITIS product enhancement working group updates and future enhancements, and we'll wrap up with the usual feedback session and wrap up. So a lot to cover, and as always, encourage folks to enter questions as we're going through the various presentations. You can use the Q&A box to ask questions, and we'll get to those after the presentations. So just to introduce today's speakers, Michael Pack, as always, is with us. He's the director of the CATT lab at the University of Maryland, where he works to make transportation data more easily accessible and usable by ops planners and researchers. He previously had worked at the University of Virginia and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Patrick Jacks is with us today from Arcadis, where he's a management consultant, and again, we'll be doing our spotlight presentation today. Patrick started his career installing, timing, and maintaining traffic signals, but as technology advanced, he pivoted toward digital solutions and began experimenting with workflow automation, which he's going to talk about today, building dashboards and web apps that could provide real-time insights to transportation departments. And Patrick's journey has led him to deliver over 100 digital solutions across more than a dozen government agencies. Some key projects in his career include California high-speed rail construction management, New York City DOT off-hours delivery program, the Georgia DOT Regional Traffic Operations Program, and the Tennessee DOT I-24 Smart Corridor that we're going to hear about today. And finally, last but not least, we have Bob Frey with us today. Bob is the Director of Project-Oriented Planning in the Office of Transportation Planning at the Massachusetts DOT. Bob's worked in a variety of roles in his 20 plus years at MassDOT. Most recently, one of his focus areas has been vehicle probe and GPS data, and he's managing MassDOT's RITIS contract. And he's been a familiar face at these various coalition meetings, including the RITIS user group. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. As always, really appreciate it and hope everyone enjoys the content today. So next we're going to get into a few different polls here. Always like to get a sense of, how often people are attending meetings, how you're using the various tools, and what your audience is. And this really helps us understand, how to tweak things and really meet your needs. So we'll leave this up for a few moments, give folks some time to let us know the answers to these questions. Always interesting to see, especially question number one. I think we usually have a lot of folks that attend these frequently, but there's also generally a lot of new attendees as well. Leave that up to get some critical mass on these polls. I guess, Joanna, just let me know when we're ready to move on.
Sure thing. Let's give it another second or two. All right. The polls are closed and Esther can share the results.
So yeah, as usual, a lot of kind of regular attendees and a handful of folks that are joining for the first time. Number two, not surprising too, a lot of people do a little bit of both, right? Using things directly from RITIS and also downloading things and tweaking it to suit your own purposes. And question three, kind of a mix as well. A lot of sharing with peers and management, executive leadership, a little bit less so, elected officials, and general public a little more so. So thank you, everyone. That's always really helpful for the team here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Jacks to walk through the I-24 Smart Corridor presentation. So Patrick, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jesse. You made me sound way cooler than I actually am. So I appreciate that. And just to start off, as I mentioned, I'm Patrick Jacks. I work for Arcadis. I get the pleasure of working with a lot of DOT and public agencies. Yeah, I'm excited to share with you today. Going a little off script, I would just want to say a comment to all of our Tennessee, our North Carolinians, our Floridans on the call. My thoughts go out to you after the big hurricane. So hopefully we can help in any way, get you guys back to some form of normalcy. So anyway, been thinking about you guys. So yeah, I get to share with you guys kind of some work we're doing in the state of Tennessee on their Interstate 24, their smart corridor. If you go to the next slide for me, Joanna, just to give you kind of a breakdown, what I'll talk about is some missions and goals that we have as the Smart Corridor team and Tennessee has from a DOT perspective. Kind of lay out the phases, some different technologies that were used and implemented on the corridor, and some of our goals, and then talk about how we use RITIS for the Smart Corridor project, some of the KPIs we used. We're going to go into RPA, which I'll just explain later in the call, and then talk a little bit about how we also use the API for this project. Next slide. You can go ahead and click a few more times too to get it to right here. So I won't read. I'll let you read these for yourself. But for TDOT, and I-24, we have a common mission to help, improve safety, obviously, and then reliable transportation One of the biggest goals for the I-24 Smart Corridor project is to, increase the travel time reliability, and obviously to reduce, uh, keep safety at the forefront and reduce collisions and accidents and things like that. If you go to the next slide. So this project was rolled out in two phases. Phase one, focused a lot on doing some ramp improvements along the interstate, this corridor, and then also installing some DMS or dynamic message signs. Those are the big message signs, over the roadway. And then also putting in some DSRC radios for connected vehicle, infrastructure. And then obviously we did some signal upgrades and timing upgrades. And then we also focused a lot on the emergency, sector along the interstate. This project in total is about 94 miles of roadway that we, manage. The I-24 piece is only about 29 miles long. You can kind of see on the map on the left there. I-24 runs the bottom left side, and then running parallel with that is State Route 1 or US 41. And it runs parallel, and then we also, manage some of those arterials in between those two. But that's kind of the footprint of the project. If you go to the next slide, phase two, we rolled out the lane control systems and the variable speed limit systems, on I-24. We did a lot of fiber upgrades. We did a lot more vehicle detection upgrades, on the traffic signals coming off the ramps and on some of the arterials. And then we did some active traffic management work, again on the interstate piece and some of the arterials running into there. But on this project, as I mentioned, we installed part of the project was to install these lane control systems and variable speed limit signs. If you flip to the next slide, we'll talk about the lane control system. So for anybody on the call that may not know what these are, overhead signs that go over the lanes on the interstate or on, your road. It doesn't have to be interstate, but typically on the interstate. Over the interstate showing lanes that are closed or potentially becoming closed, or lanes that are open. And, we've installed these to help with incident management and, making sure people are, off the lanes that we have accidents on or we have, things happening at. And then some benefits of these is, reducing delay. Honestly, you might say, how is it going to reduce delay? We're cutting lanes down, but as we'll see in the next slide in a moment, it's very similar to how the variable speed limit signs work. So one of my favorite messages on this slide is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And like I was talking on the last slide with the lane control systems, it may not seem that it helps, but if you funnel everybody, where they need to be funneled at, and we can get everybody in the right lanes. Yes, it might be slower, but that means we're going to move, quicker because we're where we need to be, and we're at least moving. We're not, all merging in different spots and things like that. So the variable speed limit signs, I'm sure most of you are familiar with those, but those help regulate speed. When we have accidents or we have heavy congestion, we can regulate the speeds on the interstate. If we go to the next slide, one great thing that was introduced by TDOT was this idea to kind of campaign or share some of this information to the public, and with the goals to obviously increase safety as the top, and then also, as I mentioned, increase that travel time reliability. We wanted to let the public know that these are some of the goals of the project, and and TDOT, and show kind of some things that we're doing to help in those spaces. Thinking about the travel time reliability, I'll focus a lot on that today. You'll see how we use RITIS and its data to help us in that space on this project specifically. If you go to the next slide, how we use RITIS for I-24, as many of you probably do, some key indicators we pull and look at using RITIS will be travel time, TTIs, PTIs, and planning time, and then obviously the buffer time in between those. We also use RITIS to look at speed, see how our vehicles, our drivers are reacting to the VSLs that we've installed, and then also we look at user delay. If you go to the next slide, some of the great tools that RITIS provides to us that we use very regularly for the I-24 project is the massive data downloader, the performance charts and performance summaries. We use others. I also have used a lot the bottleneck ranking on other projects, such as GDOT and other different tools and that we use with RITIS. But on this project, we focus a lot on the performance charts and performance summaries. We use those a lot, and I'm actually going to show talk about in a little bit how we use the API to get that data as well. If we go to the next slide, why do we do this? Why do we use these different tools, and what are we doing with the data? I'll go in a little bit more detail towards the end of my conversation, but about the dashboard. But we use RITIS along with many other data sources such as crash data and maintenance data. We use event monitoring data from our traffic management center. So what's great is we can take the RITIS data and aggregate that with all these other things to give not only TDOT but our Smart Corridor team a good view of the corridor and the project in a general sense. So we get to see how our traffic signal maintenance is going. We get to see different events that are happening along the corridor, and we get to put RITIS data on top of that to see when this event happened, how did our traffic what did our traffic do? How did it react? So it's really great to see all these things come together in a holistic view for the project. If you go to the next slide. And Joanna, this is a little video on the right side. If you could just like hover over it, and it could be still, I don't know, but the image on the right side is supposed to be a video. And this is what I'd like to focus a lot on. As this video plays, what this is a RPA workflow automation. And this is RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation, for those that are not familiar with it. But we use this RPA flow to go into RITIS and put in the parameters we need to put in and pull these reports for us to help automate this repetitive process. We're constantly in need of the data from RITIS for our reports and things like that. So we were able to create these RPA flows to help us get that more frequently and when we need it. You can go to the next slide, that's fine. This for those that are not familiar with what RPA is or may have never heard of it, again, it stands for Robotic Process Automation. And I'll just read this. It's the use of software bots to automate repetitive rule-based tasks across various applications, to help improve efficiency and accuracy in workflows. And so a lot of people get scared, they see stuff like this and oh, software bots, that's too much. Well, really all it is pointing at specific parts of your screen and writing rules to say, hey, go here, find this, click that. And if you go to the next screen, we'll kind of see that in detail. So RPA, as I mentioned, it's just a bunch of rules that you set up. And we pretty much say, hey, go look at these specific user interface elements on this page or on this, application. such as like your Word or Excel or things like that. Click on these individual things and then do this. So like starting at the top in this image, you can point into the address bar of your browser and say, hey, click in here and put in this URL, and then send the keystroke return or enter, and it'll load that page up. You can put in delays. Sometimes you'll find that you need to put in some delays to help smooth the workflow process out. So that's why you can tell it, hey, wait 2 seconds before you do the next command. You can send commands using RPA to actual like specific hardware, such as your mouse or even speakers or anything like that you have connected to your machine. You can have you can point specific events to those, and that's what we're doing. That second line is we're saying, hey, position your mouse at coordinate 386 and 251 on this screen and send a left click. And so when it does that, it'll click on wherever you have your mouse pointed to. That's one way. Another way is to actually find the element, on the page. So trying not to get too geeky here, but on a web page you have HTML and this stuff that has all these titles, and they have ID numbers and names, and you can actually have the RPA look at that page as HTML code, not as just a picture, and say, hey, go find the element that has a title, add time period. Or you can, like on the bottom one, you can say, hey, go look for this div or this container that has an ID of 54321, whatever it is, and you can pass events to those specific elements. So as you can imagine, using RPA in this way is incredibly powerful, and it does save tons of time when you're having to do a lot of repetitive tasks and things like that. So if you go to the next slide, I think I have something in here to show some kind of benefits. In a very general sense, I would say RPA could save you 20 to 50%, of the time on average, for just doing things that you do every day or have to do every month. You could set up some RPA flows to help, to help do those processes. On the right is a little chart I kind of threw together, with 12 routes in RITIS, it could take up to 2 resources, that week, spending about an hour and a half, amongst the two, to go into RITIS, pull the report from RITIS and download it and save it over here into this folder so that we can update, this dashboard or this report. And another thing is that's more than likely going to happen, during peak hours of the tool being used and things like that, because your employees are actually having to go and do that. Using RPA, we found that we don't really have to have the 2 resources focusing their time each month or each week doing that. Now they can actually focus their time on looking at what they care about, which is the metrics that it's generating, and coming up with solutions to problems. And we've also seen that it's reduced the time a lot. So you don't have you can run these RPAs concurrently. So you can have these 12 routes all being pulled at the same time, which just cuts down your time significantly when you think about it like that. And then what's great too is you can run these off peak. So you can have these run in the middle of the night or on the weekend. So by the time you're coming back to work, you've got your data sitting where it needs to sit, and it's ready to go. So anyway, just some small benefits of using RPA. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to talk very, very briefly about the API. For those that are not familiar, the RITIS team does have an API available for RITIS, and I've got to tell you that the whole team, Tom Jones and his team, that help with the API are just incredibly helpful. But as a word of note is you do need to have experienced software developers to work through the API and to set it up. But our team is fortunate to have a team of developers that can help in this way. And so, we've been able to use the API, in addition to or in place of, and sometimes the RPA, to pull the massive data downloader reports as well as, some of the performance charts or the performance metrics. And this has really, helped streamline that process even more because each can run on schedule and, really see the benefits of using their API. Um, you know, for those that agencies or companies or whatever that may not have access to big software development team, I would also recommend and tell you to experiment and play around with the RPA route. Most of those, there's technologies out there such as Microsoft Power Automate or UiPath, or if you have some experience with Python, you can write these RPA flows that we talked about, to help automate this if you don't have a big software development team or anything like that to help you set the API up. But anyway, if we go to the next slide, I wanted to drill into our dashboard a little bit. So using the RITIS data for this project, you can see we're tracking the TTI, PTI, and BTI for current year versus baseline. So before the smart corridor happened compared to what's happening now. Using RITIS, we can also see the travel time in minutes, compared to which direction, and it's just it's just great that RITIS gives us this data that we can slice and dice and really drill into certain specific areas of our corridor to see where we're struggling at or where we're doing well at. We can break it down by peak hours, which is really important to the team, to see how we're functioning and how we're managing in certain parts or certain times of the day. So it's great that RITIS provides us that capability to report it and see it in this way. If you go to the next slide, I think we're going to see some speed. So this is another really great thing. Not only do we just get to see speeds, but we, because the way RITIS, tracks it, or they have it in their system, we can break this down by like speed zones. So you notice up at the top we have a 55-mile-an-hour zone, a 65, and a 75-mile-an-hour or 70-mile-an-hour zone. And so it's really neat to be able to take I-24 as a whole corridor and see what our speeds are like, in the 70-mile-an-hour zone at what time of day, and then the 65 at what time of day. So, thanks to RITIS and the information and the data that it has, we can really drill down and see, what spots again on the corridor we need to focus on and make some improvements. So those are two of the biggest views. We also in this dashboard, track different other things like I mentioned earlier, such as maintenance tickets, and we have staff at the TMC that tracking events and stuff like that. And so when you couple that with RITIS data, it just provides a really powerful picture of the corridor and the project in a general sense that we found to be helpful to TDOT and to our team to be proactive and see and make changes on the corridor to make it more efficiently stable, and obviously to help improve safety. If you go to the next slide, I think is a question I have to you guys and kind of also to myself that I like to think of is okay, we've done all this, we've got a nice dashboard, but what can we do next? And I'm, to answer that personally is, I want to drill into RITIS even more and see there's so many other types of reports and metrics that can be pulled from RITIS. So I'm excited to drill into what those can provide, doing a lot more with user delay through the API and using RPA even more to pull more information from RITIS. So I'm excited to see how we can use some more of the modules in RITIS to obviously better improve the I-24 project. And then another question I thought of is who's next? So yeah, we get to do this on this project, but there's many other opportunities out there where, you know, RITIS provides us data to different state agencies. And, you know, so who's next in your mind that we, you know, you or we, you know, can help use RITIS to further their and make their corridors and their traffic and their safety, you know, more efficient and more productive. So I think that's it. The last slide is just a little slide of thanks to a few individuals. If you go to the next slide, um, you know, we have Lee Smith at the TDOT traffic operations. So I really appreciate him and our opportunity to work on this project, as well as Amy, also with the ops division. And then Matt Ricciardi, he plays a huge role in the I-24 Smart Corridor. He's the one that really looks into these metrics on a daily basis. So I really appreciate him and opportunity to work with him. And then myself, if you have any questions, I hope you have some. But even after this call, there's my contact information. I'd love to chat with you and talk about anything you guys have. So yeah, that's about it for me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Patrick. Definitely a really interesting presentation, and I'm sure folks appreciate your offer to chat about, you know, how to do some of these things. So we do have a couple questions that started to come in, and I'm sure folks have other questions they're thinking about. So feel free to keep adding things to the Q&A box here. The first question is from Barry Fradkin from the Massachusetts Port Authority, and so he's asking, does RPA enable you to pull reports using data that is not accessible via the API, or is it more to capture the RITIS report layouts without needing to do additional data visualization on the back end? So I guess if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, Barry, that is an incredible question. And to answer the first part, yes. I mean, it definitely can help you pull data that the API is currently not able to get to yet. Um, but you know, when I explain this to a lot of people too, is that a lot of times we find, for instance, somebody at TDOT or maybe one of our traffic engineers, you know, they say, you know, I go to RITIS, I click on here and I go to this report and download this. And this is how I get this data for this report, or this is what I like to look at. And the power of RPA is you can literally replicate their exact process. And so you can ensure that, you know, they're pulling the data, or we're pulling from as developers or whoever, report builders, we're pulling the data that they're wanting, they're using. And so while yes, I completely agree with you that RPA can be used to pull the stuff that API doesn't offer, I think it can be just as easy to use pull data that it does offer as well, if that's easier for you guys. But and then to talk a little bit about the visualization piece, is what's awesome too about RPA is, let's say you go into RITIS and you build a chart and you really like that chart, but you just want the chart. Yeah, let's say I don't need, you know, I don't need all this other stuff, but I just need the chart. Well, you can also build your RPA to literally take a snapshot of that chart and put it in this report. So if you really like how you know, RITIS is visualizing things for you, you can go and take these screens and have it compile one big report with all of these you know, with all these visuals in it. So anyway, I hope that answered your question, but yeah, definitely use it, you know, if you can't get to it with the API.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Pat. Thanks. I think that does really answer the question. I think when we were talking about it the other day too, preparing for this meeting, you were talking about how it really helps standardize things as well. If people are doing things
Sure.
in slightly different ways, and sometimes you end up with a slightly different result because of that, this can smooth some of that out in addition to just saving a lot of time for folks.
Yeah, great point.
And so another question that came in from Andrew Nichols with the Virginia DOT is asking just which RPA software have you found to be the easiest to use? Do you have kind of a preference there that you would recommend?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I'm a Microsoft fan. I use a lot of Microsoft tools, and I think we find ourselves using Microsoft a lot because our agencies already have Microsoft in many instances. So that's a good one to go with. But um, the specific one that we use a lot is the Microsoft Power Automate. So look into that. That it it is just getting better and better and better as the technology evolves, and more easy to set these things up and configure. I mean, in most instances, you can literally click record and just go record, kind of like you can do in Excel, right? To set up a macro or something, you can say, "Hey, record my movements," and then take that as a baseline. So, I I find Power Automate good to use, but as I mentioned, UiPath is another really good one. Salesforce has some options out there if you're a Salesforce house, and then if you have a seasoned Python developer, the Python can also be used to write RPA flows.
Cool. That's all. So it sounds like there's a lot of different options out there. It sort
A
of
lot of
depends
options.
what your
Yeah,
agency's already using. Do you
sure.
find they have good sort of like training or how-tos for these tools? It sounds like you don't necessarily need to know a ton of coding to be able to use some of these tools.
Exactly. That's the beauty of them, especially nowadays. There's a huge emphasis on low code, no code, and using tools like that to help. So yes, I mean, from a Power Automate and UiPath perspective, there's tons of resources on the web and on their websites to help you work through how to do this. Python as well. I mean, there's a huge community with Python. It would not be hard to spend an hour or so to do some research and understand, and you'll be building workflows pretty quick.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I'm sure this is appealing to a lot of folks because I think as you become sort of more of a power user in RITIS, you end up, wanting to generate similar reports again and again, which, it starts to become time consuming. And again, the consistency challenges that we talked about before. Um,
Yeah, I didn't mention it, but that's kind of how we started with the RPA. Was we had these routes, and it was just taking our engineers a good bit of time to go through and download the reports every time we needed it each month. And so, I got to think, well, heck, let's use RPA, and we'll just create a flow that just does this for each route. And like I said, what's great is those can run concurrently, with each other, so it does save a lot of time. That's how we got started, and then also got the API while we were waiting on getting credentials and things like that set up or familiar with the API. This was a great interim solution, to get reports automatically. So.
I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. Michael or anyone else on the team here, does anybody have any other questions? I think we still have a couple minutes for Q&A if we want to.
So I guess I have a question. I'm not familiar with these RPA tools, and you mentioned you use the Microsoft one. Are those like free things that just come with all the other Microsoft products, or is it something you license as part of Power BI or something? How does that work?
Yeah, no, great question. No, you do have to have a license. These are licensed products, through Microsoft. Just similar to how your organization buys you a license for the Office suite. So your Word, PowerPoint, Excel. You can also buy, an additional license. Relatively low cost, comparable to what you would pay for the Word and Office and those things. But it is another license that you had to buy to start using that tool set. Now, UiPath is the similar situation for them. It's a licensing type thing, so you pay them a certain amount per user per month or whatever. To use their tools.
Is it like an unlimited, like if one person got it, could you just run hundreds and hundreds of these things, or do you know how it works?
Yeah, I mean there technically are not threshold limits, but from a uh, I guess security and efficiency perspective, obviously put a limit on how often and how fast and when and what you're doing with it. But no, there is no limit. At least from a Microsoft perspective, I don't know on UiPath if they put thresholds. So, like if you've built this many, then you're in this tier and you be able to pay extra. But Microsoft does not do that. You pay the license and you can build however many flows you want to build.
And is it something where you schedule these jobs to run and they happen in the cloud, or do you have to have your computer on and the software running for the processes to occur?
That's it. Yeah, another really good question. Yes, yes, and no. So there are what they call cloud flows that you can use and build, and it actually run in the cloud. But for a lot of the RPA, where you're actually using the hardware on a machine to go here, point at this, click that, those are going to have to run on a local machine or maybe a virtual machine. So a lot of times, we have it set up in a way that we have a virtual environment that we run these flows on. You know, that way it's not like tied to Patrick's computer. And Patrick's computer has to be on to run the flows. Well, a lot of times we'll set those up in a virtual environment and run them that way. But yes, for a lot of the RPA stuff, you're going to need a machine to run it on.
This is all fascinating. I think it's really cool stuff.
And we have one more question come into the Q&A as we're talking here. This is from Rob Pangborn asking, would this sort of tool work well with complex data selection when running analysis in RITIS? Or complex date selection, sorry, not data, but date.
Okay.
Because yeah, I think a lot of folks sometimes, I'm sure you've dealt with this, Patrick, where you're like trying to pick certain dates and it's not as easy as just saying 1 month or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And yes, what's great is you can not only can you set up the RPA process, so go here, click that, do this, but what you can also do is set up like variables and things like that. You can run functions, in the workflow. So you can say, maybe you put this on top of some type of interface or a button, that you want people to use this RPA to, pull their report or whatever. Then you can put it on the interface that says, hey, I want to pull, the maybe the Tuesdays, of every month or something like that. Let me just look at the Tuesdays. And so, I mean, while it would obviously take some work, on your end to calculate, write the formula or the function to calculate what that would be, each Tuesday of every month, you can do that in the workflow. And then based on what that formula outputs to the workflow will depend on what it goes and clicks on, and inputs into like the the date, where you can choose the date field in RITIS. So you can use variables and different functions inside of the RPA workflow to calculate these dates that you're looking for. And the other instance too is you can do like you can repeat process. So you can say, the first time you run through, choose this date to this date, or look at just this date. And it goes and puts that in the inputs on RITIS. And then the second time you run through, I want you to do, this date through this date. And so you can set up different processes and get really as granular as you want it to, for it to output what you're looking for. That was a little confusing. I confused myself a little bit there, so I'm sorry about that. But
I think that's
hopefully that
perfect.
answered your question.
Yeah, Rob was clarifying like he's doing a search of all Mondays for the past 4 weeks and then looking at like different time periods for like 2022, 2023, 2024. So I think what you
Gotcha.
described, really did hit on what he's trying to do there.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for the questions and thanks Patrick for answering those. That's some great discussion. And perfect timing. I think we're right on schedule to move into our next presentation. So once again, thanks a lot, Patrick. Really
Yep.
appreciate this
Thank you all.
presentation. And if folks think of other questions after the fact, send them in and we'll facilitate responses. So with that, let's move into our RITIS product enhancement working group update and future enhancements. So I guess we'll turn this over to Bob and Michael.
Thanks, Jesse. I think I'm going to lead off here. So many of you are familiar with our group, I think. We've established a pooled fund to help pay for many additional features in RITIS. And we help the CATT lab figure out where to focus their resources and what projects to prioritize, and help keep RITIS responsive to the needs of its users. And there's thousands of them out there. We've had 5 DOTs that have contributed funding. We're always looking for more. Thanks to Georgia, Virginia, Massachusetts, Oregon, and Michigan. It's important to keep this funding stream going. I've been talking to a few other DOTs about future funding, and I hope I can continue those discussions with them. DOTs can use federal SPR money, state planning and research funds, to contribute to this pooled fund and have an influential say in the improvements that get developed going forward. And certainly MPOs and others can contribute funds as well, not just DOTs. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's some of the things we funded in the past. This is not an exhaustive list, but most of these that you see listed here, we've gone over them in previous meetings. Some were fairly easy and inexpensive to implement, like the aerial photography, the speed layer tiles. Others took longer and were more costly, like the dashboard sharing, and the next gen trip analytics, which is still expanding, and you'll see some more examples of that from Greg Jordan in a few minutes. So next slide. There are also many improvements that get funded outside our group, and here's a list of those projects currently funded with other sources. Michael is going to go over some of these in more detail. Many of these have been longer term and more expensive projects. Collectively, they are about $11 million, but they're all really good improvements. With the graphics here, you see that RITIS has expanded well beyond just car and truck traffic. It can now track transit buses, ships, and planes, given the appropriate data from the right agencies, of course. Next slide. So here's what is being worked on now in various stages of completion and funding. The ones here, I'll just go through a few that have advanced based on the preferences of our working group and the funding available, and some that are now complete. The XD API enhancements were deployed back in April. They're for programmers and developers that don't need to or don't want to use the RITIS interface because they already have their own tools and applications. The business use handbook, that is the RITIS best practices, that's inspired by Oregon's handbook that we've shown examples of in previous meetings. A more generic version is now available in the tutorial section of RITIS. Mirroring of XD's selections. This allows a user to pick endpoints of roads rather than having to just type in a road or search for it. And this way you can actually build a route. This is specifically for INRIX TMC segments, where it will automatically choose the opposing direction once you pick the endpoints. Downloadable
Hey,
volumes.
Bob, for what
Yes,
it's worth,
Michael.
that one's done and deployed.
That one is, yes, a lot of these are deployed already. Downloadable volumes, I think that's deployed as well. In the PDA suite, you can choose from available volumes, whether it's from INRIX or your own DOT if you supplied those to the CATT lab, or NPM RDS. And remember, the CATT lab always needs volume data from each state, updated annually if possible. Weather overlays. Michael has several slides to show on this, so you can see correlations between weather events and congestion. Also want to mention the automated work zone reporting. This is a popular but expensive feature. We still need more money to complete everything. There are several new work zone templates that have been deployed. They pull from different performance metrics from the PDA suite. We've had a design review group who have made suggestions to have the most common metrics automated. So you can just choose a template and it will automatically populate a lot of the information. That's just a quick summary. Michael has some more demonstration slides. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Bob. Let's move on. All right, so we're excited to announce that we just deployed, like earlier this week, what we're calling the RITIS Best Practices Manual. This has been added to the tutorials page, like Bob just mentioned. You can go and download it. It's a PDF document, an interactive PDF document. These are some of the sections that it has. It's long. It's 180 pages, but it covers a lot of things in great detail in RITIS that we never have time to go over in training and everything else. And it even talks about the different data sets that are available and what the differences between those data sets are. This was modified off of Oregon DOT's version of a similar document. So we want to give special thanks and credit to Oregon DOT for helping out with this. Next slide, please. I've just got a few screenshots of some of the pages of this document, overviews of the tools. Next slide. Things like specific use cases of how to leverage some of the tools to find slowdowns or excessive speeding or whatnot. Next slide. Examples of functionality that many people probably don't know about because you just don't dive in to the depths of all the different tools often enough to be able to remember where these things are unless you're that's part of your job. Next. So that document's out there. Charles Latimer, who I think is on this call, had put in a ton of effort on that. So thank you, Charles. The other thing I want to mention is a new feature that was rolled out within the last couple of months, and that is the ability to look at weather data in some of the tools beyond just the real-time tools. So I'm using a Texas snowstorm as an example here for this first one. This is back in February of this year. Next slide, please. If you're running a congestion scan, I think everyone here is probably familiar with these. You're looking at a diagram of the roadway, and you're looking at where the congestion is occurring. You're also looking where the crashes are occurring, and that's what we're seeing right here. Next slide. But if you look at the top middle of this tool, there's a drop down where you can switch between different metrics that you want to be displayed in the screen. So, typically you're looking at speed or congestion, but there's other things you can look at as well. The newest one is weather, and the weather is in inches of precipitation per hour. So that can be snow or that can be rain. So if you switch to that, next slide, then you can see when it was raining or snowing on the roadway. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the blue mess, you can see it started out as rain and light rain, and then as time progressed, it transitioned into snow. And you can actually see from top to bottom how the snow worked its way across the roadway. So, it started up there on the eastern side and, worked its way down. Next slide, please. And then if you go back to just looking at congestion or speed, it is possible to overlay both of these things on top of one another at the same time. So here we're showing dots that represent snow. And again, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see some little slashes. Yeah, those slashes represent rain. So the same thing on the next slide. It's okay, you can go to the next one. The next one here is an incident that occurred also in Texas on a different road, I-20. And you can see that a crash occurred a little after 11 o'clock in the morning, and that created a queue that started to back up. The gray is indicative of no data being available on that particular road segment because that road was completely shut down, completely blocked. No one was getting through. So you have no probe data. Well, you see the incident ended, and after the incident ended, then it started to rain pretty heavily. And so you have additional congestion that's occurring because of the rain. Next slide. And so again, you can switch from, the congestion and the weather to just the weather. And I think there's one more maybe. Yeah, you can see the rain. Oh, then we add the incidents on top of that. All these things are display options that you can turn on and off. Next slide. Yeah, and then just back to showing everything all at once again. So this is being done nationwide. We are mapping weather data down to every single segment in the roadway. It's been going on for about a year or two now. So you can go back in time and look at this data as well. Next slide. Other enhancements that we've made recently, if you've ever used our speed and travel time widgets to create a dashboard to help you monitor corridors on in your neck of the woods, those have always been TMC segment based. Now they are XD segment based, and we're working to make other segmentation styles work with these as well. And what that really means is that you're able to do smaller chunks of roadway and finer granularity that can give you some better insights into speeds and travel times on these roadways. There's also a lot of stability improvements that we've made that make the updates to these graphics just faster and more reliable. Next slide, please. Within signal analytics, this is the tool where you can go and you can look at individual intersections, and we tell you what like the percent arrival on green and all sorts of other metrics are. We've added a new delay metric. It's called a 3-minute delay metric, and it essentially tracks the number of vehicles that are experiencing delays at the signal longer than 3 minutes. So this is both available in raw counts, and that's 3MD, 3-minute delay count, and percentage. So the percentage of vehicles experiencing a delay. That helps you try to determine which intersections and turning movements are having more issues. Next slide, please. Then a good number of you have provided not just your ATMS crash events or your 511 crash events, but you started to give us your police crash data sets as well. We are slowly working those police crash data sets into a section of the event query tool. So the event query tool is under the data archive tab in RITIS. And once you click on that, at the very top under data sources, you will see two little buttons, one for traffic event data, and that's what the tool defaults to. The other is police crash data. If you click on police crash data, then there will be a slightly different query form that pops up that allows you to query those specific data sets. It's still pretty basic functionality right now, time, date, location-based filtering. It's going to give you the same type of outputs that the event query tool gives you today. But we are now working on phase 2 of this, which will add more capabilities, more visualizations, more akin to traditional safety data analysis. So, go in and play around with this. If we don't already have your police crash data in the system, reach out to us. We're always looking for additional data sets. If you're already a RITIS subscriber, it's something we do for free. We just need you to give us your data in the right format, and we'll integrate it. Next slide, please. So the big thing that we are currently working on for the enhancement working group is these automated work zone reporting tools. RITIS will allow you to go in and run queries on your own and then use our templates to drop individual query results into a template to try to tell a story of what's going on. But that does take some effort. So what we're trying to do is create a series of work zone reporting templates that could be automatically populated by just clicking a few buttons and entering in a little bit of information about your work zone. So this has been partially funded, and so we're moving forward with the development right now. If you go to the next screen, we are starting to, the next screen. So we're starting to work on how you get access to this tool. So imagine you're on the RITIS website and there is an active work zone. You'd be able to click on that work zone, and then there'd be a button off to the right that you'd then click that would just open up the work zone reporting tool, pre-populated with information from this work zone that we're getting from your WZDX or related lane closure permitting systems databases. Next slide. And then within that, you'd then be able to say, hey, I want to analyze just the work zone location, or I want to expand the work zone location. I want to look upstream a bit and downstream a bit. And so you're going to define the parameters of your query, and then you just press submit and you wait a couple of minutes, and then 5 or 6 reports will pop out. They'll be pre-populated for you. Next slide, please. This is just showing additional expansion of the work zone to look beyond for queues and other metrics. Next, please. So we will not finish that, within the next 6 to 9 months. It's a lot of work, and we still need a little more funding to finish it all out, but we're going to make substantial progress on it. Other things that are in progress right now, we continue to modernize the mapping infrastructure that we use. We're moving over to a new mapping system that's going to be able to handle larger amounts of data all at once, especially moving data sets. So moving data sets are things like trains and buses that are moving along routes and being able to visualize those, or planes, or boats that are moving around, ships. So we're working on all of that right now, along with other scalability work to be able to handle all the new transit systems that are being integrated. And it's not just the scalability, but we're doing some new user interface work that's going to make it easier to interact with these. Next slide, please. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Greg Jordan, who's going to give us an overview of some of the things that his team has been working on within Trip Analytics. Greg, have at it.
All right. How's my voice, Michael? How do I sound?
Sounds great.
Great. Okay, everyone. So Trip Analytics, just as a refresher, is a tool that takes essentially routes of trips. It's something like 10% of the trucks, maybe 5 to 10% of the cars, actually approximately where they started, approximately where they ended, and those are blurred for some privacy issues, and then the pathways in between. And so once you have this database, what kind of insights can we do? What kind of change detection can we do? And we're finding a lot of both planning and operations applications, but we've done just a few improvements that were suggestions from users, and I just want to review those because they're actually pretty handy. Next slide, please. This is a standard OD matrix for Fulton County, Georgia. It's what the last slide showed. We've got trips originating in Fulton County and figuring out where they ended up. And in the bottom right corner, there's about 25,000 trips in this OD matrix. And the question that we had was, what kind of information can we present and export for these trips? So next click, please. If you click on the display options, next click, please. which drops down a menu of choices of the different ways we can change this matrix. The OD matrix is currently showing the sample counts. In other words, actual real world trips. Where were they coming from? Where are they going to? But we can also look at these other metrics. Click again, please. For example, percentages, and convert the table, the matrix, into percentages. But we've also added average travel time, the 5th percentile fastest, the median travel time, and the 95th percentile slowest. And this was a request up from Nevada, one of the MPOs up there. And then another click, please. A consultant in Pennsylvania, HNTB, asked us to say, well, we really need or would like to get that median pathway distance by OD pair. So whatever zone they came from, whatever zone they went to, what is the median time? Because they want to track changes over time. Next, please. So if you click the export button, and then the menu opens up, says export as OD pairs to CSV. That's the key, is to click there. Next one, please. You get the CSV file. Next click, please. And you get the travel times that we just looked at. And again, this is for each OD pair, both the travel times and the median distance. That's where you get it. I'm just going to walk through a little use case application to show how this can be used. Okay, next slide, please. There is the bridge, the key bridge that collapsed in Baltimore. And to demonstrate this, we picked up, say, well, how about trips that started just north of the bridge and on the way to the capital area of Maryland, the Annapolis region down below? Let's kind of do a before and after of travel times of trips that were actually in the database from points north to the capital area. Next, please. So these are the pathways the trips found beforehand, and if you see on the right over there, of all the trips that we found that went from and to, as shown, almost 80% of them took the key bridge before the loss of the bridge. The other 21% went through the 2 tunnels over closer to downtown. Next slide, please. After the bridge collapsed, virtually everybody, and these are, by the way, this is a truck. I filtered for medium and heavy trucks. So this is truck data. 98% of those are now taking the 2 tunnels. So presumably they've gone a little further. And then the question looks at, well, what do those routes look like and what do the travel times look like? Next slide, please. This is what the OD matrix looked like, and the 2 boxes on the right were for the northern part, just north of the capital area, and then another sub-county south of it. Next, please. If you drop down the menu and click on percentages, we can see percentages. Click, please. Notice on the upper left corner, it tells you what you're looking at. So of the 100%, breakdown shows that 60% was going to the capital area and 40% was going to the sub-county to the north of it. Next, please. And then next, please. These are just the metrics that you drop the menu down. Next, please. And next, please. If you take these and consolidate them into a table, you can then get a before and after. So on here at the top, for just the average travel times, that 54 minutes, that was the average travel time going to the farther way to the Annapolis area. And the travel time went from 54 minutes to 58 minutes. So it's a 4-minute longer travel time. Whereas trips going to the farther north, they were actually, they had a faster trip, but they were experiencing 9-minute longer travel times. The next slide, please. And here we have the median trip distances. On average, it was only about 1 mile longer for the median path distance for these trips. So anyway, that's an illustration to show how this can be used. It's also, we're always looking for suggestions of how to improve the tool. There's a lot of work going on right now. It doesn't mean that we can always do the changes you've asked for, but we're doing our best to work these in. And again, both of these were things that came from the user community. So that's that's the end of my presentation. Next slide, I think, is right. So I'll hand it back to Michael and Jesse and see where we're going to go from there.
Thank you, Greg, Michael, and Bob. As always, a lot of cool stuff. So we did get a couple of questions. I think most of these came in while Michael was presenting. Craig Casper, I'm going to start with that one because I think we may have already answered it and just want to confirm that. Craig Casper from the Corpus Christi MPO was asking if the police crash data includes severity information. And it looks like we're saying it depends.
Yeah, so some agencies provide that and some don't. You know, making sure the tools handle it if it's there and can account for it if it's not is something we're working on.
Yep, as always, we can only show what we have, right?
So yes, you know, severity could include things like you know, how many injuries there were in the incident and even where the people were sitting in the vehicle, depending on the agency.
Yeah.
I think one issue we've been having is some agencies are sending us their police crash data in the form that it's, you know, made publicly available on websites where there's limited data that's actually there. So, you know, agencies that can give us the real data, so to speak, behind the scenes stuff that has all those additional data elements would be that's helpful.
Thank you. And then Kim Sampson was asking, I think, about the weather tools, and basically, I think asking, so it's sort of the opposite of what you were showing. Like, is there an enhancement plan that could isolate congestion that had nothing to do with weather, basically?
Well, so kind of there's another tool that we have that's called the causes of congestion tool. And if you go to that, you can select an individual corridor from any point that you want, or you can choose a county or you know, zip codes or even the entire state and choose a date range. And then we will tell you of all the congestion that's occurred, how much of it was weather related or just recurrent congestion or crashes or work zones or what have you. That tool gives you all sorts of metrics like that. It does not then allow you to go back and draw congestion scans of the roads that had congestion that wasn't weather related. You'd have to do that manually right now. I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Kim, or not, but if you want to write to me separately or call me, then we can talk more about what you're looking for and try to help you out.
Sounds like that was pretty much what Kim was looking for. Yeah, that's a great tool if folks haven't used that. Causes of congestion. It can be really interesting. I looked at a corridor where I think it was like 90% of the congestion was signals, you know, so really points you towards a solution.
Now that tool, as Bob was mentioning earlier, or maybe you were mentioning it, we do need updated volume data from everybody because that tool doesn't work very well unless we have some sort of volume profiles. So again, reach out to me and we can get your volume data updated.
Good reminder. Always important to have the freshest data here. So more comments just on the crash data sources. So yeah, I think Craig, we can work with you to bring that data in. Doesn't look like we have any other questions at the moment. But just encourage folks as always. Let's see.
With a
We
hand
did get a
raised.
thanks coming in from Ben Cheney saying appreciate you know, just appreciating the help recently as ODOT added their police crash data and transit data to the platform. Again, you know, really a lot of opportunities for the data you have to be brought in now to look at things more holistically. Sorry, Joanna, were you saying something?
Jesse, I see that Dave Adams has his hand raised, so we're
Oh,
going to
okay,
let him speak.
great.
Yeah, good afternoon, guys. Thanks for letting me speak quick. I've been in touch with the RITIS support team, and I had a few suggestions on some potential improvements. And you know, I was told to kind of filter it through this type of feedback, you know, in the regular update meetings. So I don't know if is there a particular person maybe I should work through. And if I could give you a little bit of background, I'll try to make it really quick. So we had an I-95 closure related to what we call the CATT project, which we're capping 95 between Center City and the waterfront. And what we did was we even stood up our incident command center during that closure, and sent out updates on how long it took people in the queue prior to the closure point, just so that executive management in our district is aware of what the conditions are in the street related to this corridor. And through that, I just came up with a couple good ideas, and there were three of them here. I mean, two of them seemed like they were very doable. There was one that maybe would have created a bit more effort, but I was wondering, who do I work this through?
Well, we are at the right point in the time to discuss that. So this is the user feedback session. So thank you for speaking up. Let's set up a separate call with myself, you, and some of our folks, and we'll try to figure out what we could do immediately or what might take some extra work to do. And then Bob Frey leads our enhancement working group, and we can coordinate with him and the other users to see if this is something that we can move forward with as a group or if it's something we need to do separately.
All right, thanks. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I appreciate it. By the way, Mike, I'm in Ops Academy, and I saw your presentation the other day. It was a very outstanding presentation. I was really impressed. Walking through all the stuff you guys could do in RITIS. I was very impressed. Thank you.
Very much appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I know Dave works in my area in PennDOT District 6 in the Philadelphia region. So yeah, the CATT project is a great case study, to explore different things as we have these, closures. So yeah, Dave, if you want to reach out to me too, I can help coordinate analysis. But
Great.
yeah, that's great. Thanks for bringing that up, and we'll help facilitate that conversation.
Thanks, Jesse.
Anything else? Anybody else have questions? We have some time here, so if anybody else wants to raise their hand, can unmute you and talk here. Or if you want to put things into the Q&A or the chat, do have a little bit of extra time here today.
And at the same time, we can open up those final polling questions and gives people a little bit more time. So if there are questions, please just feel free to put them into the Q&A or raise your hand if that's easier for you. And in the meantime, there's two questions here that if you want to, you can provide some feedback. Because again, what you say here helps determine the next, what's presented at future meetings. So, and what changes are made.
Yeah, and be real honest, be open. Let us know what you need, what's not working. We have those questions too up here, I think, or they will be maybe.
Yeah, these are nice open-ended questions. Don't have to choose an option. Just put in whatever comes to mind for you. What things that you're currently doing, what would you like to do but you can't do, what kind of topics do you want us to highlight in these meetings, all those kinds of things. Always looking for volunteers for presentations too. Really always appreciate folks sharing the good work that they're doing, and I think we've all learned a lot over the years in these meetings and able to apply things that other folks are doing. So really appreciate when people do step up to share best practices.
Jesse, it looks like we have another participant who'd like to ask a question. Murad? I'm going to ask you to unmute your line. You should be able to speak at this point. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Maybe it was an accidental thing.
Since we can't hear you, Murad, if you have anything, just type it out.
All right. I think in the follow-up mailer that everyone will receive, will have a link to the CATT Lab's new guide. So hopefully bring it to your attention. And then as always in the follow-up mailer, we ask for volumes. But I think that was, as Michael said, it's super important to get those updated volumes in order for these tools to be the best they can be. Okay, it looks like we're going to keep those polls open for a few more minutes. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add. Nicole or Cheryl, if there's anything you'd like to say, or Michael. Otherwise, I think we could probably give people a few minutes back in their day.
Yep, I'm good.
All good for me.
Thank you.
Yep. Same. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just thanks to all of our speakers once again. Really appreciate everything. Appreciate all the comments and questions from folks. Feel free to add more in the polls here, but I'm sure people don't mind a few extra minutes. Always good to be efficient in our meetings.